This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Port Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
I am hung around with a bunch of people. I'm glad I finished that sentence if I stopped that halfway through. Hey-o. All right, so here's the deal. I got KP Wee to my left. I got Lou Filippo to my right. Niall O'Donoghue's around. And we've brought the big guy in. The former, well, maybe soon to be again, but the former field reporter for Vancouver Canadians broadcast, Kurt Appleby, will join us. Now, Kurt's a problem because when I walked into the TSN 1040 studios today, he was on with Sakaris and Price. I asked him, I said, Kurt, would you like to come on today?
Yeah, it'd be great, man. I think it'd be awesome.
Cool. So I thought exclusivity. I thought, you know what? He's going to come in. He's going to share his James Paxtonisms because, you know, he was the catcher for James Paxton back in the day. Oh, is this not true? Andrew Wadden is suggesting that it's not? Wait a second. Okay, I need to know before we progress with the show. Did you catch James Paxton? Yeah. Kurt Appleby says yes. Andrew Wadden says no. Mic him up. We need to solve this right now. This is a big deal. I came in today. I did a lot of show prep, all surrounding the fact that Kurt Appleby would know James Paxton better than anybody else.
Well, if you listen to the interview, and Chantal can bring it up, near the end, they mentioned to him about catching for Paxton. Paxton clearly didn't even know who he was. Like, he's a fraud.
That's not true.
Oh, hey, there he is.
Oh, because you know what's funny is earlier he called you Andrew Fraud.
Yeah, that's going around. Yeah. That's Halford and Bruff. Thanks, guys. Dicks.
Wow. So now all of a sudden, Kurt Appleby, I need to look you in your eyes. Did you or did you not catch James Paxton as an amateur?
I did, and I got the picture to show you.
Well, then he's telling the truth. He's got a picture. What do you got?
Okay, so I play men's league hardball, and I've invited him.
Oh, that's something to brag about.
No, but I invited him to play, and he won't play. And our catcher just got injured. Our catcher's the best catcher in the league. We need a catcher. This guy won't play. I'm just telling you, he's a fraud.
I have a full-time job here in the morning, Andrew. I can't make it in. I told you that.
Sundays at 10 a.m. That's when most of our games are. Sundays. Are you working Sundays at 10 a.m.?
No, I'm playing slow pitch.
Oh, slow pitch?
There you go. That proves he's a fraud.
Boy, I don't know, man.
This guy's,
there's holes in your story.
Oh, you're becoming a bit of a charade here, man.
Ooh, I like that. A charade.
Just raining on our parade here. You're supposed to be gone at 7:07. You're off at 6:54.
I'm supposed to be gone. You were off 12 hours ago.
Dude, this is awesome. I say you guys just mud wrestle and sort this out. What do you think?
I think you should drop the mic.
We got Dan O'Connor from the Vancouver Giants here. He'll be the official. It'd be awesome. Be like a young, dangerous Danny Davis. Now soda leaves.
See you later, bud.
Wow. He just dunked on him. All right, so onward and upward we go. Wow, what a weird start to the show. As it should be. You know what? Can we do something, Chantal? Can we just start the show all over again?
Do you want different music, or do you want the real intro?
You know what? Screw that. We need to just start all over. Let's do this. Let's start right from scratch. Why not? It makes for good radio. You wonder who should be in this game and who is in this game. We'll get to that before everything is said and done. But again, gentlemen, welcome back to the TSN 1040 airwaves. How are you guys doing?
Always doing good, Rob. Always doing good.
This segment brought to you by Mark Emery. So I want to get right into it. Of course, we talk about James Paxton. We will wait for that when it's Kurt's turn because we know that Kurt's got that picture that we all want to see. But James Paxton, of course, a Canadian-born kid throwing the no-hitter in Toronto. Which would mean more to him? I was thinking about this as I was driving in today. Would it be throwing a no-hitter at Safeco in front of the hometown fans? Or would it be as a Canadian kid from Lander, BC, throwing a no-hitter against the Blue Jays in Toronto?
Well, watching how he just kind of flexed up that tattoo on his arm, and remember, he was drafted by the Blue Jays.
09, yes.
And they could not come to an agreement. This is a pretty good way of saying, hey, you should have seen what was coming.
Oh, but come on, that was a long time back. He went to, didn't he not go to what? University of Kentucky,
Yep.
Bolstered his stock. Mariners liked him. Mariners took him. But I think what my question is you're a Canadian kid. Everybody grows up on the Blue Jays. Well, if you're old enough, the Expos as well. But it is, quote unquote, Canada's team. So what would it mean more to you as a Canadian to throw it in Toronto on Canadian soil or to do it for your hometown team, which in James Paxton's case is actually just 2.5 hours down the interstate down in Seattle. Which KPW would you think would mean more to him?
Seattle would be better.
You got to hit the red button, buddy. Come on, it's radio. Let's do this. All right, KP, what do you got?
I would think that if you're Canadian, you would want to, pitch a no-hitter in Toronto because it's Canada. Everyone in Canada is watching, of course, and I know that in Vancouver or in BC, the quote-unquote home team might be the Mariners, depending on who you talk to. But if you're Canadian and you grew up supporting the Blue Jays, you gotta, if you have a big game, you want it to be in Toronto.
I'm divided because I think to myself, nothing be better than doing it in front of your fans in Seattle. Your family's just up the interstate. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not, whatever. But I'll tell you what, the aesthetic of watching that happen in Toronto at Rogers Centre, I don't really think back to him getting drafted and all the stuff that came with 2009 because, again, it's nearly a decade later. What intrigues me the most is the fact that he did it against the Blue Jays, against their A lineup. There was Josh Donaldson, there was the big bats in there. And by the way, the A lineup, I say that with air quotations because there's going to have to be some changes on the horizon here. But to me, the whole fan base, 20,000 strong, going nuts by the time they got to the ninth inning. For me, that's something obviously he's never going to forget. But again, if you are a Blue Jay fan, you're okay that it was James Paxton. You don't like getting no hit by anybody. But if James Paxton throws it against you, I think you're almost okay with it. It's the one gimme, the one mulligan.
Yeah, for sure. Because of course he's a Canadian kid, and let's give the fans in Toronto some credit for this. I mean, this ain't the first time the Jays have been no hit in Skydome / Rogers Centre, and the fans are they're good baseball fans. If someone's got a no-hitter going, they do get behind even the opposing pitcher. But, I mean, if I'm a Canadian kid, doing it in Canada is going to trump doing it in my home stadium if I'm playing for an American team.
I brought it up last night. There's been 3 no-hitters in baseball this year in 3 different countries. One in Mexico, one in Canada, one in the United States. Chantel Chan, good evening.
Good evening.
So you have some James Paxton audio.
I sure do. And shout out to Kurt Appleby there, who gave me the heads up on this. Nice. Kurt Appleby stepping up, already paying dividends on this show. So what is the clip we got here?
Pretty amazing. I mean, it's very special to do this thing in Canada. I mean, there couldn't have been a better place, other than maybe Safeco. But Canada is very special, especially being home. I got some friends here, some family, so that's special also.
Does he have to say that because he's Mariners property?
I think so.
I mean, I know he's speaking from the heart. You're not trying to be a PR guy just minutes after you have a no-hitter, but I sit there and I say to myself, you can't be there like, yeah, awesomest place to ever throw a no-hitter, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's right, there's Seattle. I don't know. I sit there. We'll think about that. We'll leave that for Kurt Appleby. Again, Kurt Appleby with the genetic, relationship with James Paxton. We'll get into that in a little while's time. But there are so many things going on in the world of baseball. We will just finish up with the Blue Jays real quick because I don't know what's the bigger failure for me. Is it Kendrys Morales hitting below the Mendoza line? Is it Russell Martin hitting below the Mendoza line? Mendoza, by the way, under 200, which means you can't get it done offensively. Who is the bigger detriment to this team right now? I mean, Morales, for me, is the bigger detriment. You're a DH. Your only job the entire night is to get off your ass 4 times a game and put the ball in play. I mean, Russell Martin's dealing with Marcus Stroman and whatever the heck's going on, and Aaron Sanchez and Marco Estrada, so he's almost cutting his value just on what he does behind the plate. But again, Russell Martin should be hitting better than what he's hitting. Who's the bigger failure in your eyes so far?
Without question, it's Kendrys Morales. He was brought in to be a DH, and the name says it all. Designated hitter. It doesn't say designated out. It's a designated hitter. The way he's batting right now, I mean, let's be real. There's a handful of pitchers who actually have better numbers than Morales. I mean, Russell Martin, you don't want to cut too much slack here, but the truth of the matter is, I mean, when they signed that deal with him, they knew what they were getting, which was hopefully a couple of years of really, really good production, break in these young pitchers in the major leagues. But you knew as a catcher, as he ages, the production is going to fall, and that's what they're seeing. So there's no surprise with Martin. Morales is just up there to swing the stick.
What about you, KP?
Well, I was just thinking that, Paxton was probably facing like a National League team last night because, again, you have these two guys, Martin and Morales, basically pitching to a lineup with no DH. And because Morales' job is to hit, period. And what was he hitting, like 148 after last night's game? That's not acceptable if, you're paid to hit, to drive in runs. And as far as Martin is concerned, he's near the end of his career, and his job primarily is to help develop the pitchers, to make sure that the pitchers throw a good game. So I would cut Martin some slack, but both have definitely been disappointing. But Morales being the bigger one, obviously.
Okay, so you've got a guy that's a DH, and he's hitting what, $139, $140, and then you've got a guy in Double-A that's hitting 400. And he's 19. And the entire country of Canada wants to see him in a Blue Jays uniform like yesterday. I know that you got to coddle Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know that that's the right play. Like, trust me, I've thought about this. I spend far too much time focusing on a player that never actually played in Vancouver during any of his minor league stops. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is the marquee ticket. He's the guy. And I look right now at the guys that they could bring up from AAA Buffalo, and there's some guys that excite you. I mean, Danny Jansen is a guy that you could probably bring up and get some pretty decent numbers out of. You could bring up some speed. I mean, they've got a couple of different guys that are definitely worthy of coming up to the major leagues. But everybody right now is talking about when will Vladdy get here. You can't keep him in the minor leagues if he hits at a 400 clip at Double-A. You can't do it. I mean, you look at guys that could come in right now and have an immediate impact. Ian Parmley, Dwight Smith Jr., Tim Lopes, who leads Buffalo in 21 games, hitting .375. Like, that's cool, but Tim Lopes is the equivalent of saying Bueller. Like, nobody cares for Tim Lopes, but yet you've got Vladdy and the entire world waiting for him to come to Toronto. The question is, and I'll probably ask this every week till the end of the season, when do you bring Vladdy up, and would it be this year?
If they want to make sure he plays a position in the field, then you can't bring him up until that position is open. If they're okay with him DHing, then yeah. At this point, you just bring him up and see what he's got. I mean, it doesn't say you have to keep him up the whole year. Bring him up, let him hit for a while, give him a bunch of at-bats, see how it goes. I mean, if it doesn't go well, it gives you some of that humility to go back down and keep learning. And if he does, well, you've got Blue Jay for quite a while.
I mentioned a bunch of names. The one guy that I haven't mentioned is Rowdy Tellez, and this is a guy that I'm going to talk to with both Kurt Appleby and Niall O'Donohoe. Niall's the guy that knows the minor league system about as well as anybody. Rowdy Tellez has been through a lot personally. His mom's had some health issues. He's been away from the team, been back with the team, been with the team, been away from the team. It's been a tough maybe 12 to 18 months for Rowdy Tellez. But he was, a couple of years ago, that 19, 20-year-old can't-miss prospect that everybody thought was going to be the next big thing. Rowdy Tellez, as we have this conversation at AAA Buffalo, is hitting .228. No home runs, 3 doubles of his 18 hits. He's just got no power numbers, and he's already got 17 strikeouts and 79 at-bats. I know you're not driving around with a pencil and a calculator and all that stuff, so let me just compartmentalize here. Rowdy Tellez is not living up to the hype, which makes me wonder. Sometimes you can keep a guy down too long because everybody assumed that Rowdy was going to be the guy. And then all of a sudden, I think it got to his head. Why aren't they bringing me up? What am I doing wrong? Is it because I'm 20 pounds overweight? Is it because I strike out too much? I mean, I'm hitting the ball to the moon, but I'm not getting the rub. Now, all of a sudden, you look at Rowdy Tellez. He's 23 years old. He's hitting .225, and I don't know how much longer you can call him a prospect. And that, for me, is a concern.
Well, anytime you start getting moved around in the minor league system, right? Every league has a reputation for certain things. The old international, the International League has a reputation for knocking batting averages down. The PCL has a reputation for the pitcher's numbers looking better. And I'm sure the lower levels are like that as well. I mean, if he's making solid contact and hitting into outs, that's one thing. If he's just dumping the ball on the ground, that's a totally different thing. And once again, as you move along, there comes a point where the pitching you don't get those, I'll call them marginal prospects anymore. All these guys can throw. They can all pitch. You have to adjust. If he's not adjusting, then yeah, you're probably never going to see him in the bigs.
Well, the problem is Rowdy Tellez at one point was ripping the cover off the baseball, and everybody within the Blue Jays system and all the bloggers and everybody that was following him said that this is a, quote, can't-miss prospect. But the Blue Jays wanted to wait for the perfect scenario to move this guy in at the perfect time, and that has just never come. I mean, obviously, the evolution of Justin Smoke puts a guy over at first base that you're not going to move around. There might not be a, quote, spot for Rowdy Tellez, but here's a guy that was the guy. And now all of a sudden, 4 years later, he's no further ahead than AAA. He can't break through. KP, is there a case to be made for having a megastar and you bring him up, if anything, just to give him a taste of it so that he knows, even though he's going back down, at least, because I know what the argument's going to be. The argument's going to be you don't want to start the clock, and the clock means service time. The clock means you're going to have to pay him. But at the same time, there's the mental game. Would you give a guy like Vladdy even a taste if it started the clock?
Well, Rob, I think you got to think about, again, psychologically, is that going to impact the player? If he's proven himself at a AA level, and in Vladdy's case, he has, hitting almost 400, then why is he there? Why is he stuck there? He could be playing in AAA, or he could be moved up to the big leagues. Yeah, I guess the mental aspect of it is hard to gauge, but you want to, or you think about how this might impact him, because hey, he might be thinking, I've done all I can. Why am I still here? And that a lot of times they could affect a player, especially at a young age. But you never know.
Well, just the only reason I bring it up is the drum is being banged so loud. That, for me, is the biggest concern.
Well, for me, having had another week to ponder this, I know it's like a weekly thing, but actually, if I were the Blue Jays, I wouldn't call him up to the big leagues, maybe to AAA, just to see how he does, because if you're bringing him up, what is the goal? Where do you play him? Is there a spot for him? At his age, you're not going to have him DH. And as we discussed last couple of weeks, Donaldson is at third. You're not going to, in his free agent year, ask him to move, to DH or switch him around. So you might as well just not call Vladdy up, because where are you going to play him, and what's the point at this point?
I think in the case of Vladdy Jr., it certainly helps that his father is Vladdy Sr., someone who's been in the majors, someone who's done the march through the minors. And yes, Vladdy Sr. was a phenom as well. But you've got the influence of a major league player talking to his son, saying, be patient, be patient, be patient. This is the way baseball is. You don't hear any clamoring on the family side, which is almost sometimes as big an issue as anything else. If they have a position for him, absolutely bring him up. But I don't think, if your plan is for him to be your third baseman of the future, a field position, you bring him up just to DH. And that's where I'm kind of up. The second they move Donaldson, and let's not kid ourselves, as soon as they can, they will move Donaldson. He's in the same transaction. As soon as Donaldson's moved, he's being called up, regardless what level he's at.
I could agree with that. I think that's a fair play. All right, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. KP and Lou are going to go back to the bullpen and throw a few more sides. On the other side, Kurt Appleby and Niall O'Donohoe step into the hot seats. We're going to talk, obviously, a little more about the Mariners. We'll also talk about the news of the day in Major League Baseball. Can anybody catch the Yankees and the Red Sox? Could this division be over by June 15th? That's my over-under on when these two teams break from the rest of the American League East to the point that the three teams, the Orioles, the Rays, and the Blue Jays, are not even of relevance. I know. It's all doom and gloom. This is Rob Fay Nation Radio combined with Vancouver Canadians Game Day right here on TSN. Do you remember your first shift?
I do, yeah.
What was it?
I think it was a Raptors game.
And they've still disappointed ever since, right?
Ever since.
That's okay. We'll save that for another day. Niall O'Donohoe has been covering the Vancouver Canadians for a number of years for C's Plus Baseball.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Niall, I want to talk a little bit about the guy that we never saw in Vancouver. And by that, I mean, obviously, the phenom known as Vladdy Guerrero Jr.
Yep.
We will talk about Bo Bichette. We'll get into Kevin Biggio. We'll get into this Blue Jays, I guess, think tank of the next generation. But we'll also touch on Nate Pearson.
Yes.
Nate Pearson, the number one pitching prospect within the Blue Jays organization. And I don't care what anybody says.
Yep.
All of a sudden, the old fractured ulna, which is kind of a deal breaker. That's at least, 2 to 3 months?
Yeah, they say, 4 to 6 weeks. I'll take a look at him, but absolutely, yeah, it's going to be a long-term thing for sure.
And for people that are listening, Nate Pearson, number one right-handed prospect, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, breaks on a line drive just minutes after he makes his first appearance of the season after an oblique injury. The bone on your forearm between your wrist and your elbow, he takes the ball off of that. It's fractured, so he's down for a bit. Blue Jays cursed? Are they cursed at this point?
You know, you start to wonder because you had Vladimir Guerrero have the night of all nights, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. Smokes went off the hotel in left field in New Hampshire. Things are going great. And then you hear about Nate Pearson. If you saw it on Twitter, if you saw the replay of it, boy, that was sickening. Like, you definitely heard ball on bone, and it was not great. That was tough. That was tough to stomach. And of course, then you go into Roberto Osuna and his trials and tribulations. So, no, it wasn't a great day. And of course, getting no hit by the Mariners, James Paxton.
Yeah, bad things come in threes.
A player the Jays could have had in their nest.
Well, there's a few. There's the old Beatty and Bickford that could have also been there. Kurt, you've got ties to umpiring and officiating. I think that's one of the things I love talking baseball with you is you actually have an affection for the officiating of the game of baseball or the umpiring, whatever you want to call it. And I sit there and I think to myself, would I be nervous if the no-hitter gets to the 8th and the 9th that I'm not the guy that botches it? I'm not the guy that makes a mistake, because we all talk about players not acknowledging it, but umpires also have to run that game as tightly as they can. I would assume there's a few jitters and butterflies.
Well, they can feel the energy in the field just like the players, just like the crowd. They don't want to mess this up. We've seen it before with Jim Joyce and Armando Galarraga. He absolutely obliterated that call, and you got to give him props because he took to the media after, and he says he kicked the crap out of that call. He blew it. He owned up to it, but that's a perfect game that the history books didn't get to see. It wouldn't have happened today because of instant replay, but they definitely feel him. And we had Dale. You've talked to Dale Scott before. We had him on this morning, and he said, and he echoed pretty much what I just said. I probably stole it from him, but he absolutely does feel that pressure, and he's seen that. He's seen a couple no hitters before, so I'm going to take his word for it and say they absolutely do feel.
I would be nervous. I wouldn't want to squeeze, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to look like I'm trying to push this thing along. So it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't.
That's it. What do you do if it's a ball outside and you've been calling half balls outside strikes? If it's just that little bit, if there's 2 outs in the 9th, what do you do? I'm never going to have the opportunity to know what I would do.
Yeah, but it's all about consistency. As long as you've made that call in the 4th inning and in the 6th inning, then
you don't want to embarrass the game. You're just as much a part of it, and so you're up for scrutiny, just like the players are. And if you do your job, you can hide behind that. If you go outside of that, then you've got some explaining to do.
The problem is now there's instantaneous you are right or you are wrong in baseball. And it brings me something that I was talking about up at Nat Bailey with a couple of the guys the other day, is the instantaneous feedback that you now get in baseball as far as just watching the broadcast. Now we know launch angles, exit velocities. Was that ball a strike? Was it low? Was it high? Was it inside? Was it right down Broadway? There is no margin to even breathe before you know everything that ever could have come. The beauty of baseball, the eloquence of baseball, is that it was a humanized game. There were mistakes that could be made on the field, and you know what? Sometimes, gosh darn it, sometimes that's just the way that it was. Has baseball gotten too good for its own? Has it cut its nose off to spite its face now?
Well, I think it's, I guess it's kind of been going on behind the scenes for a while. I mean, you think of the Moneyball era, how on-base percentage was the big stat, and it has just progressively gotten more complex. There's even stats now for catch probability. It wasn't a 99% chance the outfielder should have caught the ball, and the outfielder happens to muff it. I mean, you're right.
Who benefits from that?
Yeah.
Because this is my problem, is when I was a kid, it was the big three. It was average, it was home runs, it was RBIs.
Yeah.
And that was how you played RBI baseball on Nintendo.
That's right.
Then all of a sudden you started getting into the secondary stats, which were OBP and all the
Slugging percentage.
which to me I could sort of kind of wrap my head around.
Or isolated power.
There is so much stuff now that is out there that I wonder if it doesn't just take away from the innocence of the game. And I don't mean innocence in the fact that it hasn't been around for 120 years and we should know every angle of it. But when is it just a game and when is it just too much stat?
The second you start injecting billions of dollars into it, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's about the owner of the baseball team making all their money and trying to find that little extra. If it's about the return on your investment, you're going to try and find that guy who gets on base that much more than the other guy in hopes that at the end of the day it brings money in a championship.
So I sit at Nat Bailey Stadium. I got my beer, I got my 3-foot hot dog or 1-foot hot dog or whatever it is that day, and I sit down to watch a game. What stats?
Or your chicken nuggets if you're KP.
Well, KP, chicken nuggets for days, man. That's okay. KP's not even here to defend himself. That's rough. But I don't know. I sit there and I'm like, well, what stats do I want to see on the video board? Because right now at Nat Bailey, it's still pretty rudimentary. It's average home runs, RBIs.
Well, until you can get it lasered up and all that, you're not going to get the launch angle.
But do I feel cheated if I'm not getting those statistics anymore? Because to me, that's how I would want to watch a baseball game, is just with the basic stats. Let me know if this guy's doing well. Let me know, or if this guy's a bag of rocks. The reason that I say this is because now all of a sudden, when I was down at spring training doing the handful of games, I was overwhelmed by statistic. Because now in your stat pack, you don't just get the daily league report. You get all of these secondary stats that come from these websites that I had never even heard of. And it made me feel overwhelmed because I was just like, people care about this stuff? People care about trajectory? And the only time that I ever worried about trajectory is when I used to play Konami's track and field. And you had to get the javelin right at 45 degrees if you were going to do it. You press A, B, A, B, then you got the pen and you scraped it as fast as you could to get a little more speed. That to me was the only time I thought of launch angle, trajectory, exit velocity, all that stuff. But I just worry that kids, when they watch this game now, are watching it for the wrong reasons. They're over analytical and they're thinking about things that really aren't what the game's about. And that, for me, is a bit of a concern.
I think it depends where you're at. I think if you're watching it on TV and you need time to kill and space and dead air to fill, you're going to look for all those little extra things. But if you're out of Nat Bailey...
Are you talking like a broadcaster?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to telling a story?
It's... you do it so well, Rob, but I think for the most part, everyone's lost in those numbers.
Well, I wasn't fishing for a compliment. I appreciate you saying that. But for me, when you say that there's dead air and you got to fill a stat or put a stat in here to justify your intelligence as a broadcaster, that for me is when we start to get away from what baseball should be, which is 3 hours and 20 minutes away from life, away from the realities. And I just worry that now you got a bunch of fans that are sitting around in a ballpark with their face buried in their iPhone or their mobile device looking for statistics that really, I mean, name a statistic that is relevant right now, like a new modern day statistic that has true relevance on the outcome of a baseball game.
I was going to say WARP, wins above replacement, because that's a huge...
But that's over the course of a season, right?
It is,
for the most part.
But they still measure it. I don't know how they measure it. I mean, you need some math degree to figure out exactly what goes into it. But, you talk about, you're mentioning stat overload. At Safeco Field, it's really nice, like, how many stats they have. But, yeah, after a while, it gets a little bit much. They always have first pitch strikes, how this batter does against righties, how he does against lefties. And it's just... Now, see, that's
actually a stat that I don't mind. And it's funny, first pitch strikes.
Yes.
Because there is a mathematical, a simple mathematical term that tells you that if this guy's behind 0-1 or if it's 1 ball and no strikes, how dramatically different those two outcomes can be. That for me, is as weird as it sounds, is one stat that I would be cool with.
As an umpire, I always like the 1 pitch, 1 out, because it means you're going to be there less. But I like the leadoff walk, because you know if the leadoff hitter's getting on base, there's going to be action behind it as opposed to starting the inning with one out.
I always assume that when a guy gets on to lead off the inning, be it a single or a walk, that immediately there's going to be some action, be it a stolen base, a hit and run, a bunt. Bunt is a lost art. I can't tell you how many years I've sat there at Nat Bailey Stadium and watched guys fumble around with the barrel of their bat trying to put that ball in play. I can't, you know what? I guarantee that it's probably no more than a 15% success rate where guys physically get the bunt down and allow that runner to move forward. And I'm not just saying because defenses have the wheel play or whatever. It's balls that end up going into the backstop, and now all of a sudden it's an 0-2 count or something where the bunt comes off, or, you know, they end up hitting the line drive or it pops up above the catcher. I think to myself, boy, when I was 8, 10, 12 years old, it burned into your mind. It became the sixth sense. You had to learn how to bunt. It was a part of the game. And I just see guys now, they don't care because bunting and moving guys around is not like it was. Now, all of a sudden, it's all about how far can you hit it, launch angles, exit velocities, stuff that, of course, is sexy for TV, but it might not help you win a game. 7:44. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to finish up our segment with these two gentlemen. Then we will bring all four of them together for our bullpen sessions, a session that has been very well received. We will have Lou Filippo, KP Wee, we'll have Niall O'Donohoe, we'll also have Kurt Appleby, and then we'll bandy about all of the world of baseball. But when we come back, we're going to switch gears. What's the best baseball video game of all time? I'm talking of all time. I don't want to hear Stratomatic or Earl Weaver baseball for Commodore 64, which I played, unfortunately. Billy Martin had himself a baseball game as well, believe it or not. I wonder if Earl Weaver's game ended in the fifth. Like when he got tossed, does that mean that the game was over? Can you imagine being an 8-year-old kid and all of a sudden it says, your manager's been tossed, game over? That'd be a great way to bring that game back. All right, 7:45, Chantel Chan joins me here. When we come back, more baseball chatter right here on Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice on TSN. But yeah, for me, there's no doubt in my mind, unequivocally, the most enjoyable game that I have ever played when it came to baseball, and I say that with all due respect to today's game with all the graphics, RBI Baseball. RBI Baseball 2 and 3 stunk, but the original one with the big marshmallow-looking characters where the curveball could start like it was almost a pickoff move to first and then still catch the outside corner. Nolan Ryan was invincible in that game. Vince Coleman dropped out a bunt. He could get to second base. I miss those days. I'm not even that old, but you know what? My kids, they play all these games like Fortnite now, and I'm like, dude, man, you would have loved Asteroids.
With graphics that are just out of this world. Exactly.
They totally wouldn't. Where would we make a case for video games? I know you guys aren't true connoisseurs the way that I am, but is there one game that always stuck out for you that you run over to your buddy's house and play?
I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately. I just remember you could throw wicked sliders and
probably RBI baseball.
I think that probably was, but it was it an MLB PA license game? Because the one I'm thinking of, they just had different names, and so I don't know. Maybe I got a knockoff.
Well, when Japanese baseball came over, there was Baseball Simulator 1000. There was Baseball Stars, which was awesome because it also kept stats.
Yes,
but I mean, there were ones where you could all of a sudden press the button and then he'd have a fire on the ball and he'd throw like 200 miles an hour. That got a little out of hand. You could play in space. Yeah. The Tokyo Dome. I don't know. I'm all for those kind of games. Now it's all on your phone. Dude, there's a game. I don't know if you guys played. It's like Golf Crush or something like that. I probably have used half of Canada's data playing that game. Of course, after hours at 5:01 is when I start. Okay, now I'll ask you a real question. How many minutes in a day do you play video games on your cell phone? I want the honest to God truth. Okay, we'll even stress it out. How many times are you either looking for scores or playing a video game on your phone in an 8-hour day? Be honest. I'm going to go 2. I'm going 2 full on for sure. I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm going to keep it honest and keep it real. Is that fair to say that 2 hours out of an 8-hour day you're on your phone?
Not for myself.
Kurt's like, dude, you're asking me right in the place where I work.
That's right.
Yeah, what am I supposed to say here? No, it is part of my job.
You can say research.
Research, like video games, that's an easy answer because I don't want to sound too old school, but I tell myself I'm not going to play any video games until I've finished reading Twitter, which will never happen.
Why don't you get what that means? We've got one from SAJ Hockey.
Never finished Twitter. Have you read all of Twitter?
Why would I read all of Twitter?
Well, that's just me. That's just me saying that I'm never going to play video games because I'll never finish reading all of Twitter.
I'm going to take a joke for one and sit it in non-smoking, please. I'm not even sure where to go with that one.
I thought it was funny.
I'm not sure it was, man. There's 5 guys around looking at each other going, what's going on here? Okay, so again, Base Wars now has a vote. This is for the old Nintendo. I knew this would get some people calling in. Slugfest, Faber Nanaimo chiming in earlier than he usually does. Slugfest was pretty unreal. And right now for your phone, Tap Baseball is pretty good.
Okay.
See, you know what they need to do is create an app where there's an overlay on your phone so you can either check your Tinder or play your video games, but when the boss looks at you from the side, it looks like you're doing your work. There's $1 million idea in there. You know what? I just caught a dose of Kurt's inability to tell a joke. That's fantastic. All right, so we're going to set up the next. Chantel's like, why am I here? So on the other side of the break, we're going to reset the day. There was a lot of good things that happened in baseball today. The Blue Jays made an acquisition with the Cleveland Indians. We'll let you know who that is. I've never heard of them, but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. We'll what do we got? 5-6 minutes to research said player.
It's not a blockbuster.
There we go. We can make this happen. But more than anything, we are going to open up the phones. We got our opportunity for you to come in and be a part of our conversation. The bullpen session on the other side of the break. Baseball's biggest stories. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day. And by the way, this Saturday, it's Super Saturday at Nat Bailey Stadium, which means national anthem auditions. For me, you know what? We've had some pretty good ones. We've had some really bad ones. We had this one dude that came in and scat. Like he came in and made everybody stand up and then proceeded to just like say the national anthem. Which in essence, I don't know, maybe if you're going to do it, Vancouver's the city to do it.
Oh, Canada.
But no, he was like, skidda bop bop bop, oh Canada. And I was just like, dude, just sing the song.
Skidda bop bop bop.
Yeah, or whatever that is. Okay, we'll regroup. We'll collect our thoughts again. 8 o'clock hour, KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Nilo Donahoe, Kurt Appleby joins us. We will get into the news of the day when it comes to baseball. We'll check in on the Blue Jays, who were winners tonight over the Seattle Mariners. And we will also dip our toe into the water. Is June 15th too early to say that the American League East will already be wrapped up? You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. We brought up the Washington Nationals, for no other reason than, are they the biggest failure in Major League Baseball over the last 5 years? Steven Strasburg, you got Bryce Harper, you've got, some guy who throws maybe better than anybody else in the game of baseball. One gray eye and one blue eye.
Max Scherzer.
Well, no, I know that. I was getting to it. I couldn't think of his name. I was dying. I didn't know what I was going to say after the 2 discolored eyes. He's got a short fingernail on his right hand. I have no idea. So, all right, long and the short of it is we think of teams that have had lofty expectations. The Dodgers could be put in this conversation. I don't think you could put the Boston Red Sox in that conversation, although KP would probably love to have that conversation. Are they the biggest disappointment over the last 5 years? No trips to the big dance, no World Series titles, yet they have maybe one of the best players in the game and maybe one of the best pitchers in the game. Yes or no?
Oh, they absolutely rank right up there with the biggest disappointments. I mean, this is a team that is absolutely loaded. I mean, you mentioned Scherzer, you mentioned Strasburg. You know what? Their 3-4 starters aren't that bad either. You mentioned Harper out in the field. There's also Zimmerman at third. I mean, this is a really good team. Their regular season record shows it. Yet, for some reason, when they get to the playoffs, they turn into the Washington Capitals.
Well, they're getting used to a new manager this year in Dave Martinez, so maybe there's some kinks to iron out. Who knows what that dynamic has been like. Obviously, it's not really produced on the field as of yet, but, you go back to when the Nationals had their first, really made the scene, their first year in the playoffs, but that was the year they decided to sit out Steven Strasburg because of the innings limit, and, I still think that just comes back to haunt the Nationals to this day.
Yeah, they're absolutely underachieving when you have 2 generational players on your team at one time, and one of those isn't Max Scherzer. You've got Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg. You'd expect them to, obviously not win any game, but Max Scherzer's been an all-star since 2013. He's picked up 20 wins twice, 18 another. They've got the pieces in place. I'm not too familiar with the surrounding pieces, but something there's not getting done.
I would say the Angels and both the Nationals are the biggest disappointments in the last few years, because Washington never getting out of the first round in all 3 playoff trips. The Angels with Pujols and Trout and not getting to the playoffs regularly. I would put those 2 teams up there as the biggest disappointments for sure.
Boston in that conversation?
No, I thought the last one they won, I thought was a smoke and mirrors job anyway, the one that went with John Farrell. That was just a team that caught lightning in a bottle. You have Rick Porcello winning a Cy Young. I'm sorry. Rick Porcello is not a Cy Young pitcher. And you had a whole lot of the guys there that just, really kind of overperformed, and they put it all together in one run.
So Matt Harvey goes to the Reds. Now, of course, we all know Matt Harvey's had a much maligned couple of years, be it injuries or stuff off the field. Now, there's the rumor that when they flew in, this is when he was with the Mets, they flew into San Diego and he ran himself up to L.A. for a late night, pisser, as they say over in, the UK. And next thing you know, they trade him. Yeah. He's out the back door. Now, I understand that there's standards, and I understand that Matt Harvey comes with a dark side. The Dark Knight has a dark side. If you are the Seattle Mariners or the Toronto Blue Jays, are you willing to put up with the potential headache and the potential that he could be a bust for the potential that he could be a star in the making as well?
Well, if you're not paying anything, if you're not paying much for it, of course you take that chance, because here's someone who has shown before that they can do it. Now, you're not going to go overboard and send like an A-level prospect for it, which the Mets did not get. But yeah, sure, you take a chance on a guy like that. I mean, the Jays have done it before.
Yeah, but when you say guy like that is the guy that a week earlier was hustling up the interstate to make sure that he could party with the Kardashians.
Hey, and what was it? Matt Bush. The Jays took a chance on Matt Bush. Didn't work out real quick. You cut bait and let him go. But if for whatever reason you can get that guy, and let's say all of a sudden it gets real, and some humility comes back and he realizes, hey, you know what? I actually have to work at this, and you can turn him around. That's really not a lot of capital to spend when your reward could be that.
Well, I think the Mets, I think it was probably right for them to cut bait while they could. And they got a pretty decent catcher in Devin Mesoraco, too, because the Mets, they needed help. I know Travis d'Arnaud, he's not exactly the healthiest of catchers. That's always been the knock against him. And I don't think the Mets have too much behind the plate, so I think it's probably a good move. I mean, it's kind of their problem for their problem. I mean,
were they looking for one more one more excuse, one last excuse to get Matt Harvey out the door? You got to remember, Matt Harvey in 2016 was 4-10. In 2017, he was 5-7. This year, he's yet to win a game, and he hasn't thrown more than 100 innings in each of the last 3 seasons. Was this just making it easier for the Mets to get him out the back door?
It's been a 3-year decline, so to speak, for Matt Harvey. Like his 2014 season was wiped out. All-Star in 2013, but if you're looking for him to kind of get with the picture, if it's been a 3-year decline, I'm not going to say it's going to take 3 years to get back to where he was, but it's certainly not going to come overnight. And Mets, they got off to a good start. They've been fledgling lately. They needed a shake-up, and what's a better way to shake up than get really a cancer out of the dressing room?
There are certain teams that won't touch guys like that with a 10-foot pole, and I'll even use football as a reference. There are certain teams like the Seahawks and the Patriots who don't, maybe they throw morals out the back door in certain instances because they know that the upside of bringing in that player can help them get to a Super Bowl or a conference championship. So, KP, risk-reward. Would you have taken it on Matt Harvey?
If you weren't giving up too much, why not take a risk, or why not take that chance? I mean, you got to remember he was playing with the Mets in New York. It's a big distraction. Maybe a change of scenery might help him. And how old is he? Like he's still
29.
He might have a couple of good years left. If you're not giving up a lot of players, I would have
bit of a me person, I think, too, because did he not turn down a chance to move to the bullpen?
Yes. He also turned down money earlier on in his career, which obviously backfired. I don't like that argument about big city, too much pressure. I mean, what, you're going to put every guy that can't hack the pressure to Milwaukee? Or send them out to Vancouver? Like, the problem is there's pressure everywhere you go.
I don't know if I'd say pressure, but even when Matt Harvey was lighting the league up, he was already getting that reputation, quote unquote, of the Dark Knight of Manhattan. And we had this discussion before the show, Rob, where every single major league player, they used to have this thing called the Jordan rules in basketball. These guys should all learn the Jeter rules of how to conduct yourself when you are a young single man making a lot of money in New York City.
Well, how to make a good fruit basket, or what was it?
An autograph baseball afterwards.
The truth of the matter, Matt Harvey was showing up on, I guess it's in New York City, it's page 6 or something like that. Even when he was a first and second year player, you're a young athlete with a lot of money. That thing starts to go straight to your head where you think you are bigger than the people you are playing with. And eventually it comes back to bite you where it's like, I ain't going to the bullpen. I ain't going to the minors. Okay, you're going to Cincinnati. Enjoy Ohio.
Okay, so Vancouver Canadians game day powered by Booster Juice right here on TSN 1040. Almost forgot the frequency. Marcus Stroman is 0-5. 0-5. This is a guy that went to salary arbitration against the Toronto Blue Jays this year, came out chapped because he lost out on a couple $100,000. He's still making, I think, about what, 6'7", 6'8". It's a pretty good chunk of money for a young guy like Marcus Stroman. But again, he's a guy that truly values himself. So after his last outing, which happened to be against James Paxton, so good luck with that. He's 0-5. He's got an ERA in the upper 7s. And now he comes back and says, well, I feel like I'm mechanically off. Marcus Stroman has tweaked his mechanics more than maybe any pitcher that I've seen in Major League Baseball since he's arrived. He's got the herky-jerky, changing his pauses so that he can throw off the cadence of the hitter. He throws from 3 different slots. So I guess my question is, when is it too much? And whose responsibility is it to rein in a guy like Marcus Stroman? Because Pete Walker's the pitching coach. You think of, here's the reason I bring it up. Last year it was Noah Syndergaard, who's self-diagnosed. He was like, no, I'm fine. Next thing you know, he's on the shelf for nearly 2 months. Marcus Stroman continues to try and find ways to tinker, mosey around, and now all of a sudden he's 0-5 with nearly an 8 for an ERA, and he can't find his mechanics. Now, I'll start with you because you got the chance to, see this organization and how they evolve their pitchers, be it TJ Zoik, be it Nate Pearson, be it all the other guys. Did Marcus just overthink the process and try to add too much to his arsenal?
I think there's probably something to be said about that. And, I think he's lost a little bit of zip off his fastball as well. It is early in the season still, but I don't know how much longer you keep going with this. I know Stroman had kind of a stretch like this, was it 2 or 3 years ago, but he eventually snapped out of it. But he's got to get it going. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure who's at fault. Yeah, he probably has. Maybe just
Well, think about this, and Kurt, you've played amateur baseball. Your pitcher comes up to you, they're throwing sidearm, they're throwing 12-6, they're throwing sliders, cutters, fastballs, changeups, the whole gamut. They're changing their cadence, their leg kick. I was always under the understanding that the reason that a baseball pitcher has that whole herky-jerky range of motion is to try to get his body in the right place so that when he lets go of the baseball, he's obviously getting the most velocity, but he can control himself and also keep himself healthy. It's an natural movement for a baseball pitcher to throw that way. So why would you try and mess with that already? It's 120 years of doing it right. Marcus Stroman's trying to reinvent the wheel.
Well, Marcus Stroman thinks he's better than a lot of people at a lot of different things. It tells me that his attention has been divided. He went to the Jose Bautista School of Branding. I think he's a little lost without his older brother in the clubhouse. He's got to get it. He's got to get it together. You mentioned the herky jerky movements or whatever he does, but I didn't see that in his last start. I was particularly looking for that. I think he's trying to rein it back a little bit. I think he's gotten a little too far out there. He lost the season when he decided to tweet out that he was upset with the arbitration process, especially when he tweeted out not too long ago that he was happy when he won it. Right then it tells me his head's not in the game. It's not on his game. It's everything that's going around.
He's a business.
Ooh, that's a bit harsh when it comes to saying the arbitration kind of affects us, because you get this every year where players win and lose in arbitration. I think what you've got here is you've got a young man who last year had a pretty good year and said, okay, you know what? I don't want to be mentioned in that second set of guys. I want to be mentioned with those top set of guys. And I thought, how can I get there?
But your play is going to do that. Sorry.
And he starts to play around. Athletes do this in every single sport. How do I get that edge? How do I get that edge? Tiger Woods has done this many, many times in golf where he's changed his swing. 3 times it worked, once it didn't. Marcus Stroman's playing around with what worked for him, and now it's not working for him, and now he's got to get that muscle memory back. And
he's trying
overnight.
I think he's trying to get better. He had a good year last year, but it's always for professional athletes about trying to get to the next level. How do I become into the upper echelon or the upper tier? So I don't think that this got to his head or anything. It's just a matter of a professional athlete being ultra competitive, and that's the way I see it. And he's been unlucky the last couple of starts. Let's be honest, like 2 runs against the Twins. The second last outing, and the last night in the no-hitter by Paxton. So he hasn't received a lot of support the last couple of games.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about the 0-5. I'm worried about him publicly coming out saying that his mechanics are screwed, because that to me is where I'm trying to take this. Is whose decision is it in the off season or maybe at the start of spring training to say, hey man, I'd like to drop down. I'd like to throw from the side every once in a while just to continue with the deception, because Marcus Stroman is one of these young pitchers, and we saw Ryan Dempster do it with the glove. You're always trying to avoid tells, but you're also trying to, mess with a hitter's cadence. You don't want to throw the same pitch twice, but maybe you don't want to throw the same timing twice as well. Marcus Stroman, to me, is like a guy that just has to make scrambled eggs and brought 13 ingredients to the bowl. Yeah. They ordered scrambled eggs. You crack 2 of them, you put them in the bowl, and you whisk them together. For some reason, I feel like Marcus Stroman has brought 2 eggs, cheese, bacon, a hammer, a doll that he played with when he was 6 years old, and, 2 jerseys. Like, it's just way too much, and he's got to simplify and just get back to the eggs.
I think the Jays maybe... you look at maybe a veteran presence perhaps on the pitching staff, like Mark Burley when he was there. I almost think, would it not be maybe worthwhile for the Blue Jays? Hey, let's fly in Mark Burley, maybe have him have a chat with Stroman. But as far as who's responsible, Pete Walker has to step in. I believe Jeff Ware is still the minor league pitching coordinator. I'm sure he's got to have a say as well. But too many cooks in the kitchen, I guess, as far as too many cooks spoil the broth. I mean, you just have to wonder, when's he going to get it back?
Well, here's some food for thought here. I know we're talking about the whole arbitration experience, and maybe in spring training, coming off of that, and they see him out there trying to play around, there could be that attitude, hey, let's give Marcus some space here, make him feel like he's welcome again, in which case then that does fall on the coaching staff, because you've got your horse right there, and you're watching him. He's running funny, and it's like, just leave him alone. He'll be fine.
Well, he comes out of arbitration upset, so maybe everybody just his hands off Marcus. Let Marcus do Marcus for a little bit, and now all of a sudden he's 0-5 with an 8 and complaining about his mechanics. That's a tough one, man, because if I'm Pete Walker, I'm like, hey, man, you said that you wanted to change this, so now you've gone out and changed it, and you're 0-5 with an 8. Now you're coming back to me or publicly coming out there and saying that my mechanics are screwed. Who do you think people are going to look at? They're going to look at the pitching coach. So it's almost like a bit of a throwing under the bus. So, on one hand, I want him to get right, but on the other times, sometimes I just wish he would, do his thing. All right, we're going to tread on this one very delicately, but the Toronto Blue Jays do have a problem when it comes to the closer. I will not speak to anything that has to do with Roberto Osuna, nor will anybody at this table when it comes to what's going on before the justice system. But the Toronto Blue Jays do have a hole temporarily with regards to who they're going to put in the 9th inning. Will it be somebody like John Axford? Will there be somebody who can step up that maybe we're not even thinking about? Axford was an interesting guy because everybody at spring training was looking at him for one thing. Will he be able to get his velocity back? His average fastball is 94.7 miles an hour this year, which makes me suggest that John Axford's arm is just fine, thank you very much. Blue Jays need every single win that they've got to even remain a part of the conversation. Niall, is there a guy at the forefront for you that can step in? Is it a Danny Barnes? Who would be your immediate guy to step in?
That's a good question. I think maybe you might have to go with O because he has the experience. He's done it before. I mean, tonight they used Tyler Clippard in the 9th inning, which is kind of curious. O has the closing experience. They did use him earlier in the game tonight. there's also been talk maybe Ryan Tepera, but Tepera, he's been giving up some untimely home runs, and I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be a bullpen by committee right now. And Danny Barnes, he's still trying to right the ship in Buffalo. So, yeah, I mean, it's a huge loss losing Osuna, and who knows when he will be back.
And they're not committing to one closer. John Gibbons was asked the question that we're bandying about right now. And usually when you don't commit, it is the proverbial bullpen by committee. But I just look right now. Obviously, that is a glaring void for a number of reasons. There's the PR angle. There's the on-field angle. There's everything that comes with that one right now. Is there a guy that walks into the manager's office and says, I want the ball in that slot? Is that what you're looking for as a manager? As a guy that obviously walks in knowing what the Blue Jays are facing for the next week, months, who knows?
Well, you'd like to see that. The one thing that gives me if I'm a Blue Jay fan and still have hope, I'm a Blue Jay fan, I don't have a lot of hope, is I remember when they rehired John Gibbons. What was one of the reasons they said why they brought him back?
Bullpen management.
He knows how to manage a bullpen. Well, we're about to find out whether or not that was certainly something that...
Aren't they already one of the most taxed bullpens in the American League, though? I mean,
considering the starters are going 5 innings.
Well, yeah, there was like a 12-game stretch where they didn't get a guy that went 5 innings.
Yeah.
Well, you go back to tonight's game. John Gibbons, he paid a visit to the mound to go see Jaime Garcia, and he said, look, and Buck Martinez and Pat Tabler are both saying, probably the conversation is, look, we can't have you leaving the game like 2 or 3 innings in. We need some length out of you. And he did get through 5. But, yeah, I mean, the bullpen, it's going to really be put to the test now.
It's got to be you talk about who's walking into the Gibby's office. It's got to be the guy with more saves than Osuna. It's John Axford with 144. 87th of all time, but he is that veteran presence. He's been there, he's done that. He was one of the top closers in the game not a few years ago, and he is also a guy that could go to Marcus Stroman and say, hey, look, dial it back a bit.
I think both Tyler Clippard and John Oxford would be good candidates for the closing job because both have experience doing it and both are veterans, and maybe if someone does step up or someone does go into the manager's office, it would be one of those two guys, I would think.
Who's the all-star? If the Blue Jays could send just one, who are you sending to the all-star game?
Kevin Pillar?
Kevin Pillar.
Yeah.
Is it that much a no-brainer?
Yeah,
I think so.
I think by the time the All-Star game comes around, it could be Teoscar Hernandez
or Jay Happ.
You're not worried. That could be. I was going to say it could be our guy down in AA. If it was just based on the hype trade, it could be Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, no,
because we all know that he's going to come up and go 7 for 5 in his first game.
Yeah, no, I think when you add everything up, including the absolutely superb defense he plays, and he's actually now hitting, not that he wasn't a major leaguer, he is now hitting with a big league bat, whereas before it was his defense that really kept him in the game and the offense was a bonus. This guy's now a bona fide major league hitter right now, and he's getting better every year. Like, he's obviously learning as he's going, and the pitchers haven't figured him out. And no brainer at this point that he's your all-star.
It's kind of hard with the all-star game selections because every year, guys get snubbed because, there are guys ahead of him playing that same position around the league. So I guess my question would be, are there any, who are the outfielders who are, shoe-ins for the all-star game? And if there aren't a large number of outfielders for the All-Star game of the American League, then Pilar would be.
I can
Blue
think
Jays.
of a few. I can.
Or if the outfield is too crowded, they might pick a guy like.
That's a tough position to crack for sure.
So
yeah, there's no doubt about it. Okay, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We've talked James Paxton as much as we can talk, but I want to talk about the passing of the torch because everybody's ready to give up on young Felix Hernandez, who's not that young anymore. My question is twofold. One, what did the Mariners truly do with Ichiro Suzuki? And the other one is Felix Hernandez. Are you buying or selling? We'll tell you what his statistics are. We'll also let you know how much money the Mariners still owe him. But if you are a team that was kicking tires, would Felix be a guy that you would kick tires on? You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. Yeah, the Blue Jays didn't come to town with the Vancouver Canadians until 2011. We were talking last night on Rob Fay Nation Radio about the best one-off in Vancouver sports, like a guy that just showed up for a year, and we're talking name notoriety, and the name that obviously came to the forefront was Matt Sundin, because everybody in Vancouver got all excited. Oh my God, we actually got the big free agent to come to town. It's Matt Sundin. He's ours, and yada, yada, yada. So we were starting to talk about all that last night. We got Mark Messier for a little bit, Anson Carter, but for me, it was really Matt Sundin. There's a couple of football guys that came through as well. Did Mark Gastineau play for the BC Lions, the former Jet? I don't know. Part of me wants to say that he played in the CFL briefly. I can't remember who it was with.
He may have been the 80s. I mean, who's the owner here again in the 80s? The eccentric fellow.
Pesm.
Yeah, that's right. And during that time, that's a possibility. I mean, I remember it used to really be a big three-ring circus after, the DeWalt and Fernandez years. But
you brought up a good point, Lou, just before we were coming into the studios today. You said, well, what about Sammy Sosa?
Yeah.
Who played for the Vancouver Canadians and ended up going on to hit, 609 Major League home runs?
Adjusted.
Man, he's changed. Have you seen the pictures of Sammy Sosa in this day and age?
Yeah, a lot of guys, when they retire, they tend to let themselves go, and in his case, in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just, it's staggering, because we have a picture of Sammy Sosa that's up in our Hall of Fame in Nat Bailey Stadium, and he's got the Jerry curl, kind of like the Juan Samuel Jerry curl, and there's a lot of guys that have come through town. We talk about the short season Vancouver Canadians. I remember a young Jack McDowell, I shouldn't say young, Jack McDowell. I had to wait for him to finish smoking a cigarette before he let me do an interview with him. And he smoked that cigarette indoors, like in the clubhouse, in the corridor between the trainer's room and the clubhouse. Jack McDowell, 2-time Cy Young Award winner, firing a dart, and then he would let me interview him.
Those were the days.
Mark Gastineau, by the way, signed a 2-year contract with the Lions, played 4 games, and was released.
There we go. The Dexter Manley of BC. By the way, best one-hit wonder. See, this is the problem. You bring this kind of a topic up, and here we go. Best one-hit wonder in Vancouver sports history, Alexander McGillney, 56 goals. But was he not here for 3 years? That's too long.
That's not one-hit wonder.
The cutoff is max 2 years. All right, if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about it. I know it's a baseball show, but screw it. We'll open this up. Who's the best one-off? Because this was what I was saying, that Vancouver has a little bit of an inferiority complex when it comes to dipping their toe into the free agent waters, because there's so many times where Vancouver tries to and comes up short. So I said, who's the guy? Like, who's the one time that we've actually gone out there and won? And I thought Matt Sundin. And that was it. That's the only other guy that I could think of. I mean, I guess you could make a case for Mark Messier.
You said 1, right?
Well,
but Messier was 3 years.
Let's strick it out, too.
We'll allow 2 years. I mean, but
Messier was really the free agent get, though. Like, that's the one time where Vancouver trumped everybody, and they got the legendary Mark Messier.
Does Cam Neely count if it was 1 year too soon? Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but Cam Neely kind of come up. We didn't go out and get Cam Neely. No. We had Cam Neely, and he went out somewhere else. Yeah. I'm talking about a free agent that there's multiple teams that are vying for him, and all of a sudden he's like, nah, you know what? I'm going to Vancouver.
That's a hard. The only other guy I can
think about that before you even answer that. Think of that for perspective. That we 5 guys have to sit around and debate through thick and thin as to who that one guy would be. Some markets, it's no-brainer. Chicago, you think they have that problem? New York, L.A.? I don't know. I couldn't think of more than 2 or 3 guys that were and Anson Carter, with all due respect, is not a guy that was highly sought after.
But one year he got his.
He had some help though, didn't he?
But that's kind of. But
yes, he did.
But that basically goes to the state of what we're talking about here. Is that this has not really happened a lot in this market.
I think Anson Carter. Not to cut you off, Anson Carter has the best stat line in the history of Vancouver sports. He had 33 goals and 22 assists.
Nice.
His line mate's jersey numbers. Yeah. And 55 points, which is Ed Jovanovski, who all of a sudden looks as a what? I don't know, man. That team holds a very special near and dear place in my heart. There's no doubt about it. You know, Anson Carter, when he came to town, Ray Bork didn't do a lot of interviews. And I knew Anson from back in Scarborough. And he says, hey, man, do you need anything from me? I said, man, and I worked for Rogers Community Television. I was lucky if the mic worked. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I would love to get an interview with Ray Bork. And he goes, come on. So off I went away from the scrums and ended up getting like a 5-minute one-on-one with Ray Bork. And I didn't even know what questions to ask him.
Does that Q give you a hard time in your signature?
Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I've come a long way. I would actually now ask him that question with like true validity, though. Okay, so we've moved on by that. Only one vote, Alex McGillney. You want to call us up, 604-280-1040, and give me your thought? I didn't realize that. Mark Gastineau only played 4 games for the BC Lions. That ain't good. Somebody brought up Doug Flutie the other night.
He was here for a few years, though.
But he was also in Calgary for a bunch of years, too.
In Toronto for a bunch of years.
Do you think of Doug Flutie in his CFL career as a BC Lion?
No, he's a Stampeder.
Some will say the Argos.
Argo, yeah.
The Argos.
His big years, really, really big years, were with Calgary. That's
Because
where
he had the safety net of Dave Dickinson.
Well, he still put the numbers up.
Yeah. I was talking about Casey Printers the other day, too.
Casey Printers, yeah.
He could almost be classified as a one-hit wonder because it was 1 year and then burn out. And then they brought him back. But what a 1 year that
He should have started the Grey Cup. I think the Argos were thrilled. We're absolutely thrilled it was Dave Dickinson behind center.
Yes, they were.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I was never on the Casey Printers train.
Yeah,
was he not the MVP of the league?
He
too?
was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
Exactly, yeah.
Casey Printers.
And he doesn't start the biggest game of the year. Go figure.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, are we going to do we have to go to the phones here? Now, usually we reserve this for Rob Fay Nation Radio, but we're going to go to Ken in Vancouver. Ken, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
We are all collectively fantastic. What can we do you for?
All right. Best one-off Vancouver ever had was a Canuck player named Paul Reinhardt that we got from Calgary for 1 year and was probably the best defenseman that Vancouver has ever had in its history. Just saying.
In its history?
Yeah.
How do you back that up? I need some proof on that. That's a tall tale right there.
The best. Think about this. We're always talking about getting an offensive defenseman who can run the power play. That's exactly what Reinhardt did for us for 1 year.
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, you've won a can of WD-40. Ken, I appreciate your call. Thanks for doing this.
All right, look at the numbers, my friend.
I'm going to right now, man. As soon as I pay my cable bill so that I can get the internet on my screen, you got yourself a deal.
Well, right off the hop here, I'm looking at, I see 2 years, 64 and 67 games.
Well, that's still 2 years, which does cut the threshold.
Yeah, he said 1 year. He said 1 year, so we're going to take him.
But once again, that basically kind of leads you to, one, the sorry state of the Canuck defense over the years and the fact that they really haven't had a lot of those guys who just come in here and spark it up.
Oh, there's lots of guys that come here and spark it up.
Yes, but
oh, sorry, you meant offensively.
Well, actually, that's okay. Hang on a second.
114 points over those 2 seasons.
There's got
That's pretty good.
Okay,
That's
Rob,
not bad.
57 each.
You covered them.
As a defenseman.
There has to be someone, and not Blue Edwards, that the Grizzlies brought in for a short period.
Byron Scott?
Ooh.
Dude, the Grizzlies never brought anybody in. They would get Damon Jones. They would get Tony Massenberg. And the only reason anybody knew who Tony Massenberg was is he played for the Raptors. No, that's a... KP, who's the biggest guy that Vancouver's ever been able to go out and get?
Now that you mentioned the Grizzlies, how about head coach Brian Hill?
Ooh, see, now that's true because he came off of Orlando.
That's right.
Where he had Penny and Shaq and took them to the final. Dude, I didn't even think about that. Good for you. I guess you could put coaches in there. Mark Crawford had a Stanley Cup ring. Vancouver got him. Mike Keenan. Wow, KP. I wouldn't even have thought of that. Do coaches count?
Well, okay, then Torts, guys. 1 year, Torts.
What a year it was.
Now, you want to talk about, talk about a one-hit wonder.
Never a dull moment.
He hit a lot in that 1 year. Yeah, actually, you know
That's
what?
right, because...
Torts chased off Luongo. Chased off a whole bunch of other guys. Got the GM fired.
Yes.
That's a productive year.
How about Louis Erickson? Well, I mean, I guess he no longer meets the...
Collectively for a year.
Yeah,
if you put all his numbers together, it would look like a very good year.
Oh, that's unfortunate, man. He's still in town, isn't he?
I think he's long gone.
You think so?
He'll be back in August, but...
Forever. He'll be back forever. His contract's forever. Anyhow, okay, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we will finish up with baseball. National anthems. I know that they're a big deal in certain sports and in baseball as well, but at Nat Bailey Stadium this coming Saturday, it is National Anthem auditions. You get the opportunity at 10 o'clock in the morning to go to Nat Bailey Stadium and test your mettle. Do you want to sing in front of 7,000 fans this summer? You will get your opportunity to audition this Saturday at 10 o'clock. We will let you know at this table who the best singer is next, right here on TSN 1040. June 15th, just over a month from now. How many games back will the Blue Jays be? Not just from the division leader in the American League East, but from a playoff spot as a whole. The second wild card. I could see it as bad as 10 to 12 games. Gents, over under on that.
For the division, I'll take the over on that action and think it could get worse because, I mean, New York is just flying and I mean, the only thing holding Boston back is New York is flying.
Yeah.
As for the wild card, that's a totally different story because that last wild card spot, you will always have teams that are just kind of dragging along, like Seattle, like Toronto, Oakland's kind of still in there, but not there yet as well. So there'll still be a couple of games of that wild card.
We're talking about the over-under 10 for the division. I would probably take the over. It seems like it's been getting bigger and bigger as the season has gone along. So, yes, I could definitely see we're at May 9th today. So you got about another month. So, yeah, I could definitely see. I would definitely pick the over on 10. As for the wild card, I think they are going to hang around the race. I could see it being 3 or 4 games.
Of the second wild card?
Yes.
Wow, that's optimistic. I thought Kurt Appleby was going to be the most optimistic.
I'm not going to be the most optimistic with the schedule coming up. They got the Red Sox twice this month alone, the Angels, the Mets. Yeah, no problem. So that's going to see the Blue Jays move down and the Red Sox move up.
With the second wild card, I think a bunch of teams are always going to be hanging around within like 3, 4, 5 games. So I would say the divisional race probably the deficit would be more than 10 games for Toronto, but the second wild card they'll still be like within 5 games or less.
All right, so wrap this up. Who is the most coveted player on the current Toronto Blue Jays roster? If I'm an opposing team's GM and I want to pluck from a team that looks like they're going to fade to, the back of the playoff bus, who is the most enticing player on that entire roster?
Well, I mean, there's going to be some guys there who are pretty untouchable. I mean, the guys who they're going to move, or we think they're going to move, it's probably still Donaldson. But, I mean, if a team could pry apart, one of those young pitchers, which I don't think they can, I mean, that's...
Stroman's got controllability, but Stroman is one of those intriguing ones as well, is he not? Again, I'll throw it to everybody at this table. Okay, so we got one vote for...
I think at this point it is still Donaldson, but there's some of the young players on that team, Pilar, the 2 young pitchers, because they can't keep them both, let's not kid ourselves, that would be extremely attractive to other teams. I mean, a center fielder who plays defense and can hit, I'll take that.
Fair enough. Where are you going?
Donaldson, I think so too, but there's a couple middle infielders. When Diaz gets healthy again, he's got off to a hot start. Solarte has been very serviceable if Donaldson's still there. And they don't want to get rid of him for whatever reason. I think those guys could provide depth for a contending team.
Dude, if they're not going to re-sign, they need an answer on Josh Donaldson well before the trade deadline, because you've got to get something back for Josh Donaldson. There's no way he walks out the front door and you don't get anything back.
Except for maybe a draft pick in the 3rd round, because they've changed the compensation rules if they do wind up. But as far as, I would agree Donaldson, but I think Jay Happ, I think he definitely would be somebody teams would definitely love to bolster their rotation with. Look at the start he's been off to, and he's been dynamite since he's come back to Toronto after getting that tune-up with Ray Searage in Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm sure Seattle wishes they had Jay Happ when he was there, but I think Jay Happ would definitely be the guy.
Well, if I were a GM of a baseball team in the major leagues looking to bolster my lineup or my pitching staff, I would look at guys in the bullpen, like a guy like we talked about earlier, Tyler Clippard, John Oxford, the guys who have had experience closing, but you bring them in as middle relief or pitch the 8th inning, 7th inning. Guys like that always get moved around, before the trade deadline.
We did see, last year with Francisco Liriano moving on, and what did he fetch in returns? Teoscar Hernandez. Nobody hits the ball harder on the Blue Jays than that guy.
I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going to have value, but when we're talking about enticing, and I think that's what the question was. I'm sorry, but Josh Donaldson is going to entice me a lot.
I think
more
Hap
than
will. Well,
a guy in the bullpen.
What about a guy like Curtis Granderson? Experience, fresh off a World Series just a year ago, and anybody that's met him thinks that he's genuinely one of the most magnetizing guys you'll ever meet. Like, he's just got an amazing personality, which counts.
It counts. This is all great stuff, but we didn't put any kind of conditions on based on the value. So if I said you can pluck one guy off this roster right now, who's it going to be to help you win today? Sorry, it's Josh Donaldson, guys.
Yeah.
For the purpose of conversation, we should dig a little deeper too. With Granderson, he's on that quick ticket, the 1 year, $5 million deal. It'd be an easy, kind of like a Thomas Vanek with the Canucks. Granderson would look very good to a contending team.
See, and maybe we should have fleshed it out a bit more, because Granderson to me is kind of a dark horse in the fact that, again, he's a guy that's got experience. He's a clubhouse leader. Some people think he's going to end up in Major League Baseball's Player Association when he's done his career, Players Union or whatever you want to call it. And I just think he's a great piece that you move into a clubhouse. It doesn't rock the boat, and you might even be able to keep him for the next year. Josh Donaldson, if you bring him onto your team,
you're paying.
Oh, yeah. Would that not be a sign? Can you do signage? Yeah, I'm just thinking there's got to be more layers to that than a guy like Curtis Granderson. But again, that's just me. Okay, final thoughts. We've got 60 seconds. Yes or no? You would take a shot at a audition for a national anthem if somebody was to give you $1,000 to go with Nat Bailey. Would you do it?
Oh, if you give me $1,000, I'll give it a try. Yeah, but no.
Would you do it in Italian?
No, I'm not a
disappointed. I don't want to hear it if you're not doing it in Italian.
No, I can't do it. I'm fundamentally against national anthems before sporting events.
What? I don't want to hear this. You know what? By the way, Matt Sekeres goes out and sings OK Blue Jays, and you won't even pay Canada's, little tribute.
I'll take the OK Blue Jays.
Would you
before every game?
So if we say this year you come out during the 7th inning stretch and sing OK Blue Jays, you'll do that?
No, I'll watch Matt do it again, though.
No. This is you. You have to wear the same undersized white pants that he wore, and you got to come out and do it. Yes,
yeah, I would, because I really like that spring training jersey. And I would want to keep that, yeah.
KP, are you in?
Give me $1,000, I'm in.
Sold. Niall?
Sure, why not?
Love it. I don't have any money, but now that I've got you, we'll just splice this, we'll clip it, and make sure that you all say yes when I play this back to you tomorrow. All right, I am Rob Fay. We end up our bullpen sessions, Vancouver Canadians game day. My thanks to KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe, Kurt Appleby, Lou Filippo. Just minutes from now, Rob Fay Nation Radio. My thanks to all these gentlemen, and of course, the First Lady, Rob Fay Nation Radio, Chantel Chan in the background. We'll see you tomorrow.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.